So just a few announcements before I share my reflections and close out this school year. This summer, I'm pleased to let you know we will host several voluntary events here at Oakdale, including 2 family movie nights on June 12th and June 30th, so stay tuned for details. We'll have our work day that'll be at a date to be determined later this summer. And as I mentioned, we are targeting commencement exercises for August 6th. I'm excited to safely bring our school community back together. You know, together is a word I've often used since arriving here. It means a lot more to me now that we are not together in person. Quite frankly, I miss you all. I miss seeing students, staff, and parents coming through our doors every day. I miss holding opening ceremony with everyone but myself. I miss recitations, recess, lunch, and teaching in person. I miss it all. I miss being together. This all reminds me of the importance of God's people being together, and how we do that moving forward will be critical. All of us are in different places when it comes to how we view this pandemic and its effects. As we plan for next year, please know I take seriously that people are processing this in many ways. My desire is to support where possible, ensure the health and safety of our school community within reasonable limits, and to engage our faith in a God who is sovereign. I'm concerned about health, but I'm mainly concerned about our spiritual health and the importance that plays in our life as a school. If we look back 60 days, who would have thought we would be where we are now? And we have around 80 days until we are set to open on August 26th. And I'm confident much more will change between now and then. So please stand by for the details, and mostly, please be in prayer. Be in prayer for this amazing place. Pray for our teachers, our students, our families, that each staff member, that God may be in their true sense of comfort, and He may be truly our blessed assurance. Allow me to close with some thoughts and reflections about this exceptionally unique year at Oakdale Academy. We started our year with a wonderful time of fellowship during our prayer and dedication ceremony and pasta dinner. That evening, I shared many things with you. Among them was a verse from Philippians chapter 1, verse 27, where we find Paul saying this: "Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, and not frightened in anything by your opponents." As we moved through this year, we saw some extraordinary things take place over the past 2 months. And my goal in the next few moments is not to tell you about a pandemic or a virus. It's not to theorize about origins of this sickness. It is not to tell you how you should feel personally about this sickness. My goal, though, is to ask, what is the role of Oakdale Academy right now? Well, ultimately, the role of Oakdale Academy is to fulfill our mission, and that is to educate. And that's what I hope to do for the next few minutes. As a teacher, I'm called to move into this area. I recently heard a great quote from the famous American author Mark Twain, who said this: "If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. But if you do read it, you are misinformed." We could institute or change out newspaper for social media, I'm certain. I've spent the last few weeks on our opening ceremonies walking through and sharing material specifically about our founding fathers and those who came after them, their views on the importance of the Christian faith in the founding of this nation and in the ways that very faith was then inspirational in creating and drafting our Constitution. So let me take us all on a quick historical tour of this land, if you'll indulge a former history teacher. The first Europeans who settled these shores did so for religious freedom. They were unable to practice their brand of Christianity in England. So they decided to cross the vast Atlantic to an unknown land. One of those earliest settlers with a charter from the crown was Governor John Winthrop, who helped to found the Massachusetts Bay Colony. On board the Arbella, one of the 11 ships filled with Puritans, Governor Winthrop reflected on what this new world would hold and what these devout Christians would and should be when he said, "We shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all are upon us." Moving forward some time, many of our founders were inspired by the words and the preaching of George Whitefield, who was said before he came to the colonies, startled England like a trumpet blast. His impact came when he first came to the colonies in 1740. It was incredible for that day and age. Author and pastor John Piper noted that prior to Whitefield, there was no unifying intercolonial person or event. And before Whitefield, it is doubtful any name other than royalty was well known from Boston to Charleston. Piper continues and says that by 1750, virtually every American loved and admired Whitefield and saw him as their champion. Now this, remember, is in a day and age prior to the internet, Wi-Fi, web conferencing, let alone mass transit. He is called the spiritual founding father. He moved this disbanded group of 13 individual colonies to become a people. One united in the overarching beliefs in Christianity and the God of the Bible. Our founders thought the ideas of the Enlightenment were inspirational to them, but they blended them with Christianity, and rather than just the ideas of the Enlightenment that would soon erupt in revolutionary France with disastrous consequences. Here, those founders decided that man cannot rule over man. That government is set up to restrain the power of men so they cannot decide what evil or essential is. Embodied in the person of King George III, the government led by Lord North as Prime Minister told these colonists their opinions, their very ability to voice them, was not allowed or acceptable. England, remember, operated under the divine right theory of kings. Now, though much limited in the 1770s, George III had great political influence and power as compared to the current Queen of England. Now remember, please, we may often call it a war for independence, but it was a revolution. Our forebears fought and were prepared, and in many cases did what they wrote in the Declaration of Independence, where they pledged to each other their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. But they did that, as they said just before those words in the Declaration, with a firm reliance on divine providence. From our earliest days, we set the God of the Bible as the head of our nation. You know, as I've shared many times over the past 8 weeks, people in America don't have to like that fact. They don't have to celebrate it. They can even try and refute that it is important any longer. But it does not change that it's a fact. Samuel Adams, one of the early leaders of our revolution, noted in 1779, quote, If virtue and knowledge are diffused among the people, they will never be enslaved. This will be their greatest security. What did virtue mean? Even as late as 1828, the Webster Dictionary defined virtue as moral goodness. We are commanded in Romans 13 that we are to be subject to the governing authorities. In America, that is not a king or an emperor. Authority comes from the Latin word auctoritas, and then through Old French, autorité, to come to the basis in English for author. In other words, the authority we are subject to is the author of our country. Simply put, in America, that is God. Well, we're not a theocracy as ancient Israel was. However, our founders, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, established first the Articles of Confederation and then our Constitution. That Constitution, then, is the supreme framework for America. It is our authority. We should weigh everything against this document. Well, the Constitution, as you may know, faced a tough battle to be ratified by the required 9 states before it became the supreme law of the land. In their defense of it, ultimately, the Federalists had to agree to an enumeration of rights that would become our Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. But the Constitution and those rights are embodied and set up for one reason: to protect the rights first listed in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Friends, government exists to punish evil. It is why we are told further in Romans 13, verse 4, that the authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. When we recite the Pledge of Allegiance, we do so to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Many times we skip over and do not realize the impact of those words. The flag, this beautiful fabric, symbolizes the republic. It is a republic. We choose who governs us.